ideas, reshaping the world far beyond its geographical borders. Soon we will have Mr. William Dalrymple joining with us. It will be an online session. He'll be with us virtually.
मैं आप सबको बता दूं, हमारे पास अलग से बहुत सारे मैसेजेस रिक्वेस्ट आई थी विलियम जी के लिए. ही इज क्वाइट अनवेल, दैट्स व्हाई ही कुडंट बी हियर, बट वी विल बी हैविंग हिम ऑन द स्क्रीन वर्चुअली getting connected to us. So please stay seated. I'll request everybody to empty the corridors, please. And we'll now let you know in further detail about the session.
One of the most distinguished historians and writers of our time, internationally acclaimed voice for his work on Indian history, William Dalrymple's books have brought rigorous scholarship together with compelling storytelling. He's online and going to be with us soon in conversation with Mr. Chandra. And yes,
friends, we've had a very tense last 2-3 days because our friend William Dalrymple, the great stalwart historian, was taken very unwell. He was very keen to come to Bhopal, and it's just unfortunate that he fell ill. And then, pardon my saying that, but this morning his internet also failed. But we are all lucky that William Dalrymple is back with a bang, and there he is, a little unwell, a little shaken up, but there, William Dalrymple. Give him a big hand. We need to hear William Dalrymple, please. Can you arrange to get his sound through? William, are you sure you are not muted? Can you unmute yourself, please? Would anybody like to suggest how he should unmute himself? Can you call him up, Parul, and talk to him? You use my phone? This is his number. Call him up. So we're getting a good peep into your house and your farmhouse, William. And there's some very interesting artifacts there. Yes, we can hear you.
All we need now is to share the screen with the PowerPoint.
Yes.
And we'll be ready to go.
Yes, I will. So friends, it's a great privilege to welcome the acclaimed historian and best-selling author William Dalrymple to our session today. Even though it's virtual, but it's still magnetic enough, I'm sure. He's the prize-winning author of White Mughals, The Last Mughal, Return of a King, City of Jinns, Anarchy, 9 Lives, The Age of Kali, and In Xanadu. He's been awarded the President's Medal by the British Academy for his outstanding literary achievements, and that resonates particularly with me for being the co-founder of the Jaipur Literature Festival. He's the co-host of the chart-topping podcast called Empire, along with Anita Anand. And today we are going to discuss his book through a PowerPoint presentation by him called The Golden Road, which you can see here, How Ancient India Transformed the World. William takes us on a captivating journey through time and geography, revealing India's most often overlooked role as the intellectual and cultural heart of ancient Eurasia. And in particular, this is relevant today because there is a lot of conversation about how Macaulay suppressed Indian creativity, Indian education, Indian culture, and yet we find Indian culture rebounding. In the last few days, we've had several books and discussions around how India has been reborn civilizationally, culturally, and therefore, it's particularly appealing to us when Dalrymple confirms that India has been the most predominant soft power in the world, even before the phrase soft power was coined, and at a time when we often hear of the Silk Road centered on China. The Golden Road of India compellingly argues that India's maritime networks preceded and rivaled it, infusing the world with transformative ideas. We've had books written along these lines, for instance, the famous historian A.L. Basham's The Wonder That Was India, but that was more encyclopedic and academic and focused primarily on India rather than how India radiated outside to the rest of the world. What William updates is with recent findings of archaeology, personal travel anecdotes all across Southeast Asia and the world, especially Western Europe, and a stronger thesis on India's forgotten centrality versus the much touted Silk Road of China. Through his vivid storytelling and meticulous scholarship, this is a reclamation of India's soft power, as I said, without too much hyperbole or without colonial understatement. So now we will start off with his presentation, and after which we'll have a few questions, and I'll ask a few questions, and we can throw it open to the House. So please allow William Dalrymple to begin his PPT.
Thank you so much. Who's got control of the slides? I don't think I can move them. So can we have the first slide, please? I think it's controlled. There we go. That's fantastic. The thesis of the Golden Road is that India was one of those places which very early on came up with a set of profound ideas that answered the basic question that humanity asked itself. Why are we here? What is the relationship of this earth to the heavens? What is the relationship? What is the size of this earth? What is the scale of the heavens? Now, India was not alone in asking this, but it was one of the countries, like China, like Greece, which came up with a set of extraordinary answers to these questions. The Chinese, I think, have been much better about making their contribution to world civilization known. And the idea of the Silk Road, if we can go back 2 slides, I think we seem to have started in the middle of the, we find in the slide of the Silk Road. Next slide, please, maybe. How are we doing? Who is controlling the slides? I have a PowerPoint, yes, no, which is on my screen. If I can control it, that would be much easier. Do we have that option? The PowerPoint you're putting up seems to be malfunctioning. It's not the right order.
Okay, so would you like to run the PowerPoint?
Yes, if I have got on my
Praveen, can you do that?
the correct PowerPoint. If we can. Have you got that? Yes. quite sure what's happened with your version of the PowerPoint, which is sort of random. Here we go.
Can you upload your PPT and run it yourself? You have the rights.
Yeah, I have. I've got
Yeah,
it,
yeah,
I've
you-
got it
you-
up on my screen.
Yeah, you go ahead. You play that.
Can you
please
see it?
can you share it with us?
I'm trying to do so.
You have the rights to do it. No, but can you overrule this? You can overrule our thing. There, yeah, see if you can play your thing.
Here we go. It's up on my screen.
Can you share it with us?
It says I'm screen sharing.
Are you getting an option which says share the screen?
I pressed it. Share.
Share.
It's coming up.
Hi, William. Let me handhold you through this. You press the share button. Now,
I am pressing it.
thereafter, you get options whether to share tab, screen, or full window. Take your pick. Go ahead.
Screen, I've got that.
Click it.
Go. You're getting it.
Once you click it, then you click on that screen, and the bottom share button will become blue.
It says I am screen sharing, it says.
Well, we can't somehow see it yet. See if there is a share button at the bottom right.
Hang on.
Okay, then can we do without the presentation and can we do a conversation?
We could do a conversation.
Okay.
I think that's probably the best option at
Yeah.
this point.
Yeah. Yes.
Because
Yes.
We've had a perfect storm of technical errors, but now we are. I think a conversation probably out.
Yes. We've had divine errors and we've had technical errors. So now let's get on to the human thing and let's carry on with the session.
Excellent.
So, William, I want you to, give us a synopsis of what you've written about in this book, about how India's thoughts, India's ideas, India's culture, India's religion, how that pervaded the world and how it went across. And I'm going to read out just a few lines from your book to get you fully hooked onto this subject and to get your thoughts in place. But for a millennium and a half before that, from 250 BC to 1200 AD, India was a confident exporter of its own diverse civilization, creating around it an empire of ideas which developed into a tangible Indosphere where its cultural influence was predominant. During this period, the rest of Asia was the willing and even eager recipient of a startlingly comprehensive mass transfer of Indian soft power in religion, arts, music, dance, textiles, technology, astronomy, mathematics, medicine, mythology, language, and literature. And now I want you to carry forward.
Yes. So I have divided into three the areas of influence which I think transformed the world. The first is the whole package of Buddhism, Buddhist thought, and Buddhist literature. The Buddha initially preached in the Gangetic Plain, and for the first 200 years, his ideas barely moved out. But with the accession of Ashoka and Ashoka's move to expand the spread of Buddhism, missionaries, what he calls Dharma ministers, were sent out not only all over India and to Sri Lanka, but to Bactria, up over the Himalayan China, and by 300 or 400 years later, Buddhism had reached as far as Korea, Japan, Vietnam, Laos, Burma, even as far as the Philippines. It's one of the great moments of not only Indian ideas expanding out across the world, but arguably the most successful example of soft power in history. No other example is there which shows how religious, philosophical, and intellectual ideas could pass over such a vast area of the globe without an arrow being fired, without a sword being unsheathed, without any military force at all. Buddhism spread along the Silk Roads by thanks to merchants and thanks to monasteries en route. And this is the period that you see not just ideas of salvation of Buddhism, but Prakrit and Sanskrit literature spreading out over the entire width of Asia. There is then a second wave of Indian influence at the end of the probably about 500 AD, when Sanskrit and applied Hinduism spreads all over Southeast Asia. And you get this extraordinary spread of Sanskrit, of Indian courtly ideas, of dance, of music, of literature, of art, and the entire glory of Sanskrit learning spreading particularly to Southeast Asia. This is the period that you see the largest Hindu temple in the world erected not in India but in Angkor Wat in Cambodia. You see the spread of Pallava-style temples across the Bay of Bengal and spreading out all over Southeast Asia. You see different varieties of Indian schools of sculpture and art taking root in countries such as Vietnam, Laos, Burma, Sri Lanka. And you see an extraordinary rechristening of the landscape of Southeast Asia. A new Ayodhya is erected outside what's now Bangkok. A new Kurukshetra appears in Laos. And the central river of Southeast Asia is renamed after the Ganges, or Marganga, or as Marganga is pronounced in Khmer, Mekong. The Mekong River is the second Ganges, although we've forgotten that today. And then the third body of Indian thought, which I read about, is the ideas of mathematics, the idea of zero. And this starts with the work of Aryabhatta and Brahmagupta, who between them come up with the concept of zero as a number, not as just a placeholder, but as a number in its own right with its own properties. Brahmagupta defines 40 different rules for zero, such as zero is the number that you get when you subtract a number from itself. And with this, you get the beginnings of the Indic number system, one of India's greatest contributions to humanity. An idea which allows you to express with the numbers and zero any number up to infinity. And this, in the years after Brahmagupta Aryabhatta spreads all over India, by the 6th and 7th century it reached Cambodia. By the 8th century, it's been taken up by the Abbasid caliphs in Baghdad. And then much later, in the 12th century, it makes it to Europe when Fibonacci takes the Indian number system as used by the Arabs in North Africa over to Italy. And in centuries to come, it becomes the universal way of expressing numbers and mathematics.
Very, very interesting. So, what really inspired you to write The Golden Road? Was it one of those moments where you saw something in Borobudur or Angkor Wat or Ayutthaya in Thailand, or was it sheer serendipity?
Not at all, no, it was, as you correctly indicated, it was traveling Southeast Asia and realizing quite how much of the civilization of that region has its origins on the banks of the Ganges and the Yamuna. When you go to Angkor Wat today, you see in the corridors images of Krishna and the gopis in Vrindavan. You see images of Kurukshetra just outside Delhi. You see battle of Lanka and the Ramayana. And this is something which always surprises Indians who visit. I think that your education curriculum does not prepare you to see quite so much Indian influence so far away from India. And the way in which India and Indian ideas molded the thought as far away as Cambodia and Laos is something which simply hasn't been, I think, brought home to the people of India in a way that it should have. It's one of the great achievements of Indian civilization.
In terms of the cultural values of the larger India or Bharat, what are those values that you find still resonating and finding eminence in these Southeast Asian countries that are essentially and intrinsically of Indian origin, maybe by some other name, in terms of family values, in terms of customs, in terms of language, apart from monuments and structures and buildings. Did you find the Indian thought sort of pervading Southeast Asia and these countries where Indian influence pervaded?
So obviously the biggest and most important contribution of India in the sense of philosophy and ethics and morality is Buddhism, which remains the principal religious system for many, many people across the whole width of Asia. And if you fly into Japan, you find not only Buddhist monasteries and Buddhist images, but coming with that, often to the surprise of visitors, Hindu deities who are part of the same snipskin, you might say. You find, for example, images of Ganesh in many Japanese temples, surprisingly. The idea of ahimsa, of non-violence, a whole variety of ideas of karma and dharma, and the idea of reincarnation. These are ideas which are deeply impregnated across many, many countries in Asia, largely through Buddhism, but Hinduism, of course, still survives in some areas, such as Bali and Lombok. Although just as Buddhism in the long run has largely disappeared from India, so Hinduism has disappeared from most of Asia, even the areas where once the dominant religion, such as Cambodia and Vietnam. But it's important to emphasize that it's not just a direct, if you like, blood transfusion of ideas from India, because you find these ideas transformed by the different countries which they arrive in. So, for example, in Khmer art, you have images of the Khmer emperors holding the conch and the discus, the attributes of Lord Vishnu. Now, you never get that in India. You get an image of, for example, Rajaraja Chola with Lord Shiva, but you never see him depicted as Lord Shiva. So there are subtle differences in the way that Hinduism and Buddhism is received in Southeast Asia. It's not exactly the same as the Indian version. And that's particularly true, I think, of the forms that Hinduism took in Southeast Asia. You have, for example, women Brahmin in Southeast Asia officiating in the temple. There is always pork eaten in Southeast Asian Hindu culture. Beer is drunk very widely. So it's not that there is a direct transfusion. These ideas are received differently in each region, and you see the same with art and architecture. When Tagore went to Angkor Wat, he summed it up very nicely in 1926, I think. He said, "Everywhere I could see India, yet I could not recognize them." In other words, the architectural forms which were rooted in Indian forms had developed in their own way, slightly differently in Khmer land. And so I think it's important to understand that these ideas are not taken bag and baggage and received as a sort of IKEA kit, which is then reassembled. These ideas take on a new life of their own in the way that they're received in Southeast Asia.
And I know you're not a teacher of comparative religion, but based on what you just said about Hindu religion transforming itself, taking on new forms, new icons, and iconography, do you think that from your studies that there is something so deep and intrinsic and basically indivisible about Hindu religion that allows it to transform itself from the exteriors to different forms and shapes, and therefore that has been one of the reasons why, despite so many centuries of conquest, Hindu religion has still survived?
Yes, I mean, I think you find different things appealing to different audiences. For example, the figure of Agastya, who is a fairly minor figure in some of the Indian temple art. He is one of the principal icons you see all over Southeast Asia, far more prominently than you do in India. You see different stories from the Mahabharata or the Ramayana appealing and being reached for. But it's extraordinary how much these epics in particular have taken root in Southeast Asia. When you go to Indonesia, the state airline is Garuda. And despite the fact that Indonesia is now largely Muslim, the Ramayana is performed everywhere. It is the principal dance live, and it remains, at the heart of Southeast Asian culture. Although obviously it's a story which came from India and lies very close to the heart of Indian ideology and thought.
I had been going to Thailand very often, many decades ago, but most recently I went to Bangkok, and I was surprised to find that the Brahma temple next to the Grand Hyatt Erawan, which used to have barely about 10 or 15 visitors, today at any given time it has something like 200 people there. That cross section of Sukhumvit and Rachaprasong Road. So it's amazing how the religious iconography and most of those people, in fact almost all the people were Thais. They were not Hindus who were worshipping the Brahma temple. So I found that extremely exceptional.
The relationship between Hinduism and Buddhism varies from place to place. There are areas in some places in history where Hinduism and Buddhism have competed, but in other areas you find them living very much side by side. You go to Sri Lanka, I was there last week, and you find Hindu deity in almost every Buddhist temple, just like you find sometimes images of the Buddha as the incarnation of Vishnu in some Hindu temples. So these ideas spread backwards and forwards, varying as the different cultures receive them slightly differently. Each of them take different aspects for themselves that appeal to them. And in this way, it's a dynamic and changing relationship with Indian thought.
William, will you tell us a little about how ancient Rome perceived India, and especially about the monsoon winds, which in school geography we read of them as trade winds, and they were actually the alternative to the Silk Route, and how India's maritime uh, movement across the oceans, how that contributed to exports and commerce from India, and how it was a cause of concern for the Roman Empire that India was doing so well in exports and in its handicrafts and what it was producing in terms of the textiles and handlooms. Please tell us a little about that.
Correct. So I think people have taken on this idea of the Silk Road in a way that the historical sources, particularly for the ancient period, do not warrant. There is no reference in Marco Polo to a Silk Road. There is no Chinese or Roman source which refers to a Silk Road. It's an idea which was actually invented by a German geographer, Baron von Richthofen, in the 1870s. And since then, the Chinese have been very good at promoting it, sponsoring exhibitions in New York and Washington and London. And people now assume that it's a real thing that unequivocally was there, like a sort of motorway, like the road from Bhopal to Sanchi, something which was a real signposted, named, real thing in the real world. The Silk Road wasn't. It's a notion that came up in the 19th century to explain continental travel over land. Now that's all very well, but there's clear evidence today that in the classical period, I'm talking the period of about 100 BCE to about 1200 AD, that you get far more contact by sea. Overland is difficult, particularly with Rome, because Persia was always a part of Rome, and it was difficult for merchants to travel through Persia. It's often a closed border, like India, Pakistan today. And what you find is that there's far more trade over particularly the Red Sea route. It takes only 6 weeks with the monsoon winds to travel from Kerala to the Roman Egyptian coast of Berenike. And thanks to its wind system, the monsoon, the winds reverse themselves, so that for 6 months they blow in one direction, then for 6 months they blow back again, which allows merchants to go from Kerala or Gujarat or the Konkan coast or the mouth of the Indus in Sindh through past Aden, past Ethiopia, to the Red Sea shores of Egypt in just 6 weeks. You could do the journey there and back in 1 year. And so popular was this route, and so profitable the things being sold by India, exported from India. Pliny, the Roman writer of the first century, calls India the drain of all the precious metals in the world. And indeed, long before Trump came up with the idea, the Romans charged a 30% tariff on Indian imports at the Red Sea ports. And we have documents. There's a famous invoice called the Muziris Papyrus, which is literally a shipping invoice of the sort which is made out in shipping offers every day in India. And it has a Greek survival that shows the contents of one container going from Muziris in Kerala to Alexandria in the 1st century. And it has 3 columns. It has the goods, the prices, and the custom price of the individual goods. And what is clear from that is that your ancestors, your trading ancestors, were ripping off my European forebears in a very ruthless manner. Pepper and ivory and silks and cotton were hugely expensive. Things that actually cost very little to produce, like pepper, was being sold at a rate in the way that oil, for example, obviously hugely inflated and make massive profits for oil-producing countries. The same was happening with Indian exports, which are all high-value luxury goods. And in Rome, they were a symbol of wealth. Like today, you might turn up at a smart polo match with an Hermes scarf or a Louis Vuitton bag. We have records of rich Roman ladies, for example, Lolita Paulina, who was the mistress of Nero, turning up with Indian pearls in her hair, Indian garnets in her tummy button, and Indian rubies on her shirt, wearing very see-through Indian silk, which or Pliny, who was very conservative Roman, regarded as sort of porno wear, sort of Victoria's Secret, because you could turn up with a pair of this, and it was possible, these were sort of semi-transparent garments, which shocked the old guard of Rome. So for people like Pliny, India was associated with luxury, with sensuousness, with high fashion, and we have other descriptions of his contemporary. Strabo, who's a geographer based in Egypt, he says that when he took the Roman governor on a tour, he saw off the Red Sea port of Myos Hormuz 250 vessels waiting for the monsoon winds to change so that they could make the passage to Cairo. So on one hand, we have a Silk Road, which is really no more than a German theory from the 19th century. And on the other, we have evidence from scholars such as Pliny and Strabo of fleets making huge trading fleets passing between the Red Sea and India. Something which is, again, just not made it onto your education system. People are not taught about this. I don't think they're aware of how rich India became from trade with the Roman Empire. And what's important about Southeast Asia is that develops when Rome falls. Indians have got so rich and so used to gold pouring into India from Rome that when Rome falls in the 5th century, they have to find a new source of wealth. And it's in the 5th century that you find trading guilds, very important institutions based in Karnataka and Tamil Nadu, pivoting eastwards. And this is the period when they begin to look for new sources of gold. Where? In Suvarnabhumi, the lands of gold. Or Suvarnadvipa, the island of gold, Borneo. And so you get in the Ramayana, the Jataka tales, references to sailors looking for gold in Southeast Asia in this period. But this was, in a sense, the second phase. The first phase was looking for gold through trade with Rome. And it's only when Rome falls that India, as a default to make up for the loss of the gold coming from Rome, starts looking eastwards to Suvarnabhumi. To this day, when you land at Bangkok Airport, it's Suvarnabhumi Airport, a Sanskrit name for the airport of the capital city of Bangkok.
The land of gold.
Land of gold.
And in terms of discoveries which were the creations of Indian astronomers and Indian mathematicians like Aryabhatta, Bhaskaracharya, and its relationship with the discoveries that were touted as to be from the West or from Arabia, you have made some very, very clear remarks, and we'd like to hear them.
So I don't think there's much dispute about the passage of these numbers from India, first to the Arab world, and then to Europe. The only thing that happened is that in the course of the 19th century, for reasons I'm not clear, that the Indian number system, which had always been called in the Arab world the Hindu number system, got renamed in Europe the Arabic number system. Because, of course, that was where the West got it from. They didn't get it direct from India, they got it via the Arab countries. So it's not an unfair name, but the Arabs got it from the Indians. So there's two stages in this transmission. Brahmagupta and Aryabhatta work spread out within the Indosphere, that within the areas of influence. And in the 8th century, the Abbasid caliphs appointed as their viziers in Baghdad a family of Sanskrit literate former Buddhist abbots. Their name was Pramukh in Sanskrit, which gets Arabicized to Barmakin, they're called. And 4 generations of Barmakids are the viziers of the Abbasid caliphs. And the first thing they do when they come to power is they send an embassy to the nearest Hindu court, which is over the Indus in Sindh, for copies of Brahmagupta and Aryabhata's book. And we have the full account of this embassy arriving. It arrived not just with the books, but with a whole cohort of Brahmins to explain the content, because Aryabhata and Brahmagupta's work was both written in Sanskrit poetry in a very abbreviated and intense form that needed commentary. So the Brahmins come with the book to explain it. And it arrives, this embassy arrives in Baghdad in the year 886. We have pictures painted of this occasion, several different accounts of the arrival of it. And it takes a couple of generations to get a really good translation of these works. There's an early attempt by someone called Al-Fazari, which is very flawed. But eventually, Al-Khwarizmi, who is from Khwarazm, as his name suggests, the man from Khwarazm, Al-Khwarizmi, which is modern Kiev, Uzbekistan, he comes to Baghdad and he makes a perfect translation of the books. It's more than a translation, in fact. It adds in ideas from Euclid and Ptolemy. And this book has the snappy title of the Compendious Book of Hindu Calculation According to Completion and Balancing, not the makings of a bestseller. So people know it by a nickname, and that nickname is algebra, the word which is the modern English word algebra. While Al-Khwarizmi's name is the basis for our word algorithm. So Al-Khwarizmi's algebra spreads across the Arab world, right up through Islamic North Africa into Islamic Spain. And by the early 9th century, monks in Barcelona, on the borders of Islamic Spain, are using the Indian number system and calling it the Hindu number system. This is not. It isn't that anyone thinks this is something that originated in Baghdad. It's acknowledged and celebrated, something that came from India. And already in Islamic Spain, you have texts, I quote in the book, praising Indians as the greatest mathematicians in the world, the people with the greatest facility for numbers. Now, although it's used in Barcelona in the 10th century, the numbers do not take root in Europe for another 2 centuries. And what happened is that in about 1120, the Italian trading town of Pisa sends a trading mission to Algeria, the other side of the Mediterranean. And the chief of the trading mission brings his kids who go to school in Algeria and learn Arabic and learn Al-Khwarizmi's mathematics, which by then is the standard text. And when they return to Pisa, the boy writes a book explaining to his friends the Hindu system of mathematics. And luckily for us, that genius Italian who wrote that book is Fibonacci. And Fibonacci, having picked up Indian numbers in Islamic Algeria, takes them quickly. His ideas, his book, reaches the Holy Roman Emperor, who is called Frederick II. Frederick II calls him to court, and he makes the Indian number system the number system used at court and then across the Holy Roman Empire. So the 12th century, these ideas spreading. And the painter Piero della Francesca takes on Fibonacci's ideas. He writes 3 mathematical treatises. They are carried by his friend Fra Luca Pacioli to Milan, where Fra Luca shares them with his flatmate. His flatmate is painting the picture of the Last Supper in a convent Milan, and his name is Leonardo da Vinci.
Wow,
So
very,
you
very
get
interesting.
from Leonardo to Aryabhatta in just 4 leaves.
Fantastic, very interesting. Very,
Leonardo to Piero della Francesca, Piero della Francesca to Fibonacci, Fibonacci to Al-Khwarizmi, Al-Khwarizmi to Brahmagupta, Brahmagupta to Aryabhatta. So from the genius of Aryabhatta in Pataliputra, the Gupta era, to the genius of Leonardo in Renaissance Italy, it's just 5 years. It's an extraordinary story.
extraordinary.
And I think this is India's greatest contribution to the world. Anywhere in the world now uses the number system. It's on every laptop, it's on every mobile phone.
Yes.
And yet, in the West, no one knows these numbers come from India because we know them in America and Britain as Arabic.
Fantastic. William, before I close this superlative treatise from your side, I want to ask you a few slightly more academic questions because you're a hardcore historian.
Sure.
You know, today we find that public history is becoming a bit of a battleground. You know, a
Yes.
battleground for seizing the narrative, for assertion of ideologies. How much do you think historians are able to hold their own and remain objective? And what must they do to remain objective? Because they're students of history here, they're young people. What's your sense of where the world is going? And what must honest historian do to remain objective and fair and not carried away by ideology or by an urge to seize the narrative and please any particular dispensation?
So any country in the world, the school curriculums are set by a government. So wherever you are, whether you're in the United States, whether you're in Algeria, in Italy, or in India, or in Bali, your government will give you a version of your history, which is often a very nationalistic version, which is set by the government of the day. It's up to individuals to read, to educate themselves, and to satisfy themselves that they have broken out, in a sense, of the ideology they're spoon-fed, and to develop their own ideas independently. For historians, it's very important to be as objective as you can, to go back to primary sources, to always tell the truth, to back up your claims with sources in primary texts. You will never succeed in being completely objective. We are all flawed human beings. We all have our own prejudices and ideas, even if they're invisible to ourselves. But it's a battle which is not unique to India. This is something which is true in any country. And only by breaking out of your national ideologies and those that have been spoon-fed to you at school and informing yourself and educating yourself can you responsibly come to a conclusion. And this is, as I say, this is not unique to India. Just look at the way that Trump has manipulated Greenland at the moment. It's important for historians to stand independent of government and to tell the truth bravely as they see it, as best they can.
Indeed, indeed. You know, history teaches us that we must look always at the future. As Santayana said, that those who ignore history are condemned to repeat it. So, before I ask the audience for a couple of questions, one salient thing that I want to learn from you is, and all of us would want to know, what are the lessons India should draw so that its cultural re-emergence, and we are seeing a lot of revivalism, a lot of renaissance happening in India, that is not culturally appended on the global stage. What is the sort of advice that you would render both to those in the government and those who are objective historians?
Well, I think that the success of the Chinese in promoting their narrative of the Silk Road, which has become then the basis for the Belt and Road, which is a thing in the real world, actually affecting geopolitics in countries across the globe, shows that it is possible for a nation to project its narrative successfully the globe. It's now for India to give its version of events. First of all, by updating its own syllabus, so that people in this country are aware of the achievements in this country. Many people here do not know it, but also, for example, the Indian invention of zero is known by virtually no one outside India. Certainly in the West. I think in our country we know about it because they still call them Hindu numbers, but in America and Britain, India has not given its version successfully yet. And there are many different ways of doing this: writing books, promoting academic chairs at university, sponsoring exhibitions at major institutions, giving the Indian version. Because there's a whole narrative here which has not been successfully projected, either internally and even less so externally. And I think another thing that needs to happen, and this is something I'm very critical of the current government with, is there needs to be more money put into archaeology and heritage. The ASR has a tiny budget that barely conserve the glorious monuments around Bhopal, such as Vidisha or Sanchi or Bhimbetka, but also wider in. It's a scandal that only 10% of the Nanda University has been excavated by now, and that the museum at the site, the 19th, is crutty little 1950s museum with dusty cabinets and lit by strip lights that hasn't been 20 years. This should be a glorious institution with, amazing narrative projection telling the story of Indian achievements. There are examples of great museums in this country. I'm thinking particularly of the CSMVS in Bombay, which is privately run and has just put up an amazing gallery telling exactly the story, partly based on ideas from my book. But at the moment, the government institutions are simply not funded sufficiently for this to be true. And any government that claims to be a champion of Indian culture and civilization could easily turn this around by just making provision in the next budget.
Yes, indeed. Government of India, as I know, both as a former administrator and otherwise, is that it is focusing a lot on archaeology and correcting the course. In some ways, we are happy that the British didn't excavate more, because we would have had more of India in the British Museum and contributing to it. As they say that, the only reason why the pyramids are in Egypt is because the British couldn't lift them. So
that's true. I think we are now seeing obviously a flow and a return of looted colonial objects coming back.
Yes.
And that will increase in the decades to come.
So William, I want
We
the
need
audience
also
to ask you.
museums to receive them.
So one or two questions, yes. So just 2 or 3 questions, because we are running late for the last session because there was a glitch in William's internet. So this gentleman here, please give your name and ask the question quickly. Or if you can ask me, I will translate it for him. अपना नाम भी बताइए और
Hello, I'm Lajpat Srivastava.
Mr. Lajpat Srivastava asks.
Yes. And my question is that, William, in this book, have you also covered, the Indian lifestyle, like yoga, meditation, and so many other things. Today, you see less and less of patience and tolerance in the world. And somehow these Indian traditions, Indian yoga systems and all, yeah. So these things are very, required today to maintain a very, very good quality of life. So is there some coverage in your book on that?
Is there any coverage in your book on yoga and Indian lifestyle systems, which was so useful for the human being?
No, I think, as we all know, yoga is a thing that has gone completely rational, and in many ways has been taken away from its Indian context. You see the yoga taught as a sort of fitness technique rather than as a spiritual technique. And it would be very nice to see India reimposing itself on yoga teaching with more with a greater fidelity to the original yoga text.
Yes, one last question. This gentleman here.
Thank you, sir. My name is Mr. Anshul Tiwari, and my question here is that during your research on and studies on various topics like English, art.
Rudraksh Mukherjee in the front row there, looking at his phone.
Sorry?
That Rudraksh to your right here. Anyway, keep going.
Thank you, thank you. So my question is that during your research and your studies on various topics like science, arts, literature, commerce, etc., which is that one profound topic or school of thought which has had the most impact on the for the Indian history towards the world, across the history, and also was that impact, was the world ready to absorb that impact? Like we see in technologies, there are many devices which were way ahead of their time. So was the world ready to receive that impact or not? Thank you, sir, and get well soon.
If I had to choose just one thing, it would be the idea of zero. To my mind, his greatest philosophical and scientific contribution to world civilization.
The idea of zero, the shunya, Atal Shunya ki Anant Sambhavna, as Raza, the famous painter, used to say, William. S.H. Raza always, he was from Madhya Pradesh. He was from Madhya Pradesh, and his school teacher.
Was he?
Yes, he was from Vidisha, which is 1 hour away, and you mentioned it.
I know Vidisha well, and your wonderful museum there.
Vidisha.
Which we also incidentally do with
Mandla Vidisha, and he used to say that his school teacher told him that the zero is very much an Indian invention, and it is shunya, and the teacher would say Atal Shunya ki Anant Sambhavna. That is, Atal is that is which is immutable, which is everlasting, and Anant is infinite. So the infinite possibilities of the eternal zero. Thank you very much.
I think just to answer that, you're absolutely right. That it is no accident that zero as a number was discovered in India, because it has linked so closely with that central Hindu Buddhist concept of shunya, the void. And so you see Indian philosophy and Indian science going from a common root.
Thank you very much, William. Despite extremely poor health and extremely poor internet, he's managed to recover, do an outstanding session for us. And we want to present you virtually, since you are present virtually, we'll present this to you virtually, the painting done by tribal Padam Shri artist Durgabai Vyam, especially for the Bhopal Literature Festival, called Little Goraiya, which is about the little sparrow's family story about how it rescued a young boy and saved the family. And we will
I'll have to come back to Bhopal to pick it up.
No, we will have it delivered at your place with a promise that the next BLF you will not miss it for any reason. Thank you.
BLF, I will come even on a stretcher.
No. I don't mean that. Thank you.
Thank you all for coming, and apologies for the technical hiccups.
Thank you. Great job. And now we'll have the next session.
Thank you so much, and let's show some appreciation to our audience who was so patient, and our technical team as well, to bring this session live to you. Thank you.
Okay, everybody, the next session is going to be for everybody who is intrigued and interested by army operations. People here who are from